Edition of NAMI Tennessee at Home Live. And have we got the world's greatest guest for you? Literally the top guy. But before we get to the phenomenal guest, I have to tell you to sign up for NAMI. I do this every week. NAMI Tennessee's email list, NAMITN.org. Head over, sign up. It's absolutely free. It's how you find out about events like this, our gala, our walk, everything that's happening in the state of Tennessee, and how you can be involved in mental health advocacy from the comfort of your own home, absolutely free. All right, enough of that. Jeff, the man who needs no introduction, our executive director for the past 10 years. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Well, Gabe, with that build-up, I think we just need to have you on the camera there, the hostess with the mostest.
I love that. This is you're retiring, so this was the last time. Normally I introduce Jeff, like we have our executive director here. We're very excited to speak with him about mental health. But I thought this is my last shot. This is the last time that I can give you the over-the-top introduction, unless the new executive director lets you come back. So make friends with him or her. I mean, it's important. It's important that you stay on good terms with NAMI Tennessee.
Well, first of all, Gabe, it's been a pleasure to do these programs with you from time to time. And I did suggest let's look back at the last 10 years, maybe even a little more about mental health and how things are changing. But I'm going to start with Gabe Howard. You got to come back on camera there, Gabe.
Uh-oh.
So 3 years ago, the pandemic began, so that doesn't go back 10 years. And NAMI Tennessee changed really quickly because we could not get together in person. So Gabe here, I knew, liked to talk. I hope that's not a secret. And he's got some enthusiasm when he talks, maybe a little more than I do. He can be animated on camera, and I've seen him off camera. You give him Diet Coke, he can be animated there too. So, Gabe, I asked Gabe, would you start recording some videos? And we wanted to create more content because all of a sudden, mental health was a big thing for everybody. And NAMI was more about mental health as a big thing for people with serious mental illness like schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD. It could go either way. Depression could go either way. I think it's serious if it interferes with your life, whether we label it serious or not. But mental illness was not on everybody's mind. And that changed with the pandemic. We were stuck at home. We're isolated. You can't go see grandma, which you've talked about, Gabe. And you can't, there were drive-by birthday parties on my street where cars would drive by and honk and the family out in the yard. There was a death in my family. We were not going to the funeral. There wasn't a public funeral. Things really changed, and we wanted to help people, and mental health was for everybody. So we began with those videos. Tell us about those, Gabe. You interviewed your sister. Who else did you interview? My daughter.
Yeah, we tried to make these little 5-minute videos, and that's, well, anywhere from, it sort of went through a lot of changes real fast. It's first it was like, okay, Gabe, here's a topic, talk about it for a couple of minutes. And then that sort of got boring real quick, right? I mean, we answered a couple of questions, we got a couple of things out of the way, and then it was like, well, but that's just sort of the Gabe show, and it's Gabe's opinion. How can we expand this out? How can we have a bigger conversation? So then we opened it up to like 5-6 minute videos where I tried to interview people. They weren't live, they were done, like Jeff said, I had his daughter, my sister, some other people about different things that were happening during the pandemic. For example, my sister was at home with her daughter for the first time ever. My sister is not a stay-at-home mom. My brother-in-law was still going to work because he's a police officer, so there was no work from home for him. But my sister was work from home, and Debbie, and obviously Eva, her daughter, was work from home. My sister's like, oh my God, do I hate my child? Which because she was overwhelmed. And so we covered that, but then these little topics for 5 minutes, they sort of gained some interest. And Jeff was like, wow, I wish we had an hour. I wish we had 45 minutes. I wish we had a half an hour. How can we do this in some bigger way? And this version that we're doing right now was born after a few months of those other things. And we've been doing it ever since for the last couple of years. They're anywhere from a half an hour, 45 minutes is about the average. And we just interview people, and it it really peaked, especially during the pandemic, like Jeff said, and it took the place of what a lot of NAMIs were doing with getting together in the community, where they'd have like Ask the Doctor events. Those couldn't happen anymore, so this started to take the place of that, and we really focused them in on Tennessee, and I mean, yeah, that's I
Well, the
hear.
point of it for me is that NAMI needs to share information, and not just classes and support groups are important, and they're important today, and people benefit from them. Uh, but not everybody makes it to a class or a support group. And we were not selling anything. We were putting information out there. And what was different about what we've done here over the last 3 years, so that's not 10 years, uh, we had just as many peers talking about their personal experience as you have, as we've had PhDs and executive directors and licensed people. So we've had a mix. And uh, the pandemic enabled us to get people to come on camera that we might not have been able to get in person, like Ken Duckworth, that 2 weeks ago, coming to you from Washington D.C. So we had people from all around, and we got to have the pure voice in there. So I think that that's one of the changes, which is kind of, in the middle of 10 years, but it illustrates another part. Looking at 10 years within NAMI for me is it's been a major, major, major transformation. And we've touched on it already with the classes and support groups. Those have been around a long time. We pivoted those with COVID so they can be online, and teacher training can be online. It makes it easier to be a teacher to go to the training if you don't have to go away for 3 days and you have children or other responsibilities. So we can do things online. But NAMI is not just about serious mental illness and caregivers. In the last 5 years, we've worked a lot on mental health and criminal justice. But even before that, going back about 10 years ago, uh, NAMI's movie for correction officers and mental health came out. Now, that may not seem like an important issue for everybody when you talk about correction officers and mental illness, but for the people that have a loved one in jail, which is a lot of people, where there's a mental health condition, to have some training for the correction officers who, before NAMI came around with this training, I believe most of them thought people were just being a pain in the butt, or they're malingering, or they wanted special treatment. And there wasn't really a recognition that we had people in jail that should have been somewhere else. And we're not finished with that, but we've made really great strides to move people more toward health, not handcuffs. So CIT began in Tennessee, and it was actually 30 some years ago. But there's been a renaissance in Tennessee in the last 5 years, which has been led by NAMI Tennessee, because we were fortunate enough to learn about some grant opportunities, which we applied for. And that turned into the state legislature earmarking some funds. And now we have state funding, and we have 3-person staff, East, Middle, and West Tennessee. And if you look at the map of where there's a CIT program in Tennessee, we had it mostly in the urban areas. And now you look at the map, most of the state, more than half of the state, has had some work around CIT, whether they've had people trained, or there's a local task force going on, or there's actually CIT training going on. That's been a big change too. And it's more than that now, because NAMI was part of the movement to have 988, which means in a mental health crisis, instead of calling law enforcement first, we're calling mental health crisis people. And over 90% of those calls are resolved without law enforcement. Now, we know that law enforcement still needs training and can come upon a scene where there's a mental health crisis. But the largest majority of these crises do not need law enforcement, and they're better handled by crisis workers. So I've seen a big change here, although it's only been a year, not even a year. 988 went live across the country and in Tennessee in July of last year. So we've got a long way to go there, but there's a new number. And if you get nothing else from today, write down 988. We hope you never have a mental health crisis, but it's good to know the number.
I cannot agree with that more. Thank you so much, Jeff, for I have many more questions about the last 10 years and also just your entire career in general because you started in the 80s. But I want to save that just for a moment because we have some questions from the audience that I promised to get to. And I really like this question because I I just really like this question. And Tiara wants to know, why did you start working at NAMI? What made you become the executive director?
Well, like most people within NAMI, I have the family history. So my father had bipolar disorder. He was also a physician and had health insurance, but he had a lot of psychiatric hospitalizations. My mother had psychiatric hospitalizations. So I kind of grew up around this mental health issue. It impacted our lives. We moved around a lot when I was a kid. I never had any treatment myself until I was in my 40s, but I worked in the field. I became a social worker, and I knew about NAMI. It's not where I planned to work. Not that I had any problem with it. I was more mental health center, hospitals, um, and then I became executive director of a social service organization. So I'm working with people and therapy and mental health. But what really brought me here is I wanted to come back to Tennessee from New Hampshire, where I lived, because it got a little bit cold up there. And I happened to have a fiance that did not want to move into the where it's cold for 4 months. So I learned about the NAMI opportunity. It was a good fit. It's been a real privilege and a pleasure to be part of this, to meet the many people, to watch things grow. I've been fortunate with the board of NAMI Tennessee that they've allowed me to start many new things like videotaping and having these e-news and that. But we didn't have the walk, and now we have the walk. We didn't have a gala. Now we have a gala, and the CIT that I mentioned. So we've not stood still because the need is really immense. That there's a lot of people really alone still, not around anybody that understands or can lend a hand, and we have to do better. So I wanted to come to Tennessee, but I think it was a really great fit. And it's going to be sad to go to the next chapter, but uh, it allows for new blood and new ideas. I'm excited about that too for the organization.
I like that. I like that a lot. I thought for a moment you were going to say that what brought you to NAMI, Tennessee was that you were cold. I'm glad that you
As part of it.
expanded upon that. Let's stay on that. We have another question from the audience. Thank you so much, audience. Please continue to put in your questions. Jeff is happy to answer them. But I think it goes along with your, you mentioned expanding out NAMI, but Peggy wants to know what the best way to have a voice for mental health if you have a story to tell. And of course, I personally know that you and NAMI Tennessee have helped lots of people get their story out. You mentioned peers, you mentioned doing events like this, getting word out legislatively and media-wise. But if you can share maybe some of your favorites or maybe some suggestions or programs that people can get involved in, I know that Peggy would appreciate that.
Well, it's kind of funny timing because just this past weekend, we had In Our Own Voice training, and In Our Own Voice, IOOV, it's a program where we train people to better share their story for advocacy. And the actual program is there's a kind of a protocol where two people go together and they could talk in a church group, at a Rotary, in a workplace, a church, a mental health center, and they share their story from how they began to see that they had a mental health condition and how they journeyed along and are doing something with it to help other people. So we know that we've learned from the AA field, Alcoholics Anonymous, that many people get better by helping others. So they have to work on their own recovery, but part of recovery may be helping other people. So in our own voice is one way to do it. And we train a couple times a year. Training was online. It was over a weekend where it was kind of sunny out, but uh, we're always thankful when people will give of their time. And what I think is beautiful about all of NAMI is you don't have to get a degree and make it your entire life if you want to help other people when we're talking about mental health conditions. So you can share your personal story that way. Each year in March, just again last month, we have our Day on the Hill training, and that goes all year. But we get together in March and we have seminars and in person to help people to train how to talk to policymakers like state legislators. So we have training, and then we also send out alerts if there's a bill that we're opposed to or a bill that we're in favor of, to try and encourage people through using their story to talk to their legislator about why this is important. So, for example, there was a bill related to homelessness, which we're extremely concerned about. And I personally think that the way to try to help with that is supportive housing, where we get people housed and we get them some services, um, whatever they may need. However, this particular bill was to set up camps outdoors with tents and I imagine fences, and requiring people to go to treatment if they were believed to need it. And we didn't think that's the way to go. Uh, just to take everybody that's homeless and put them far away where nobody can see them is not the kind of recovery life that we want people to have, where people are involved with their community, they can grow, they can focus on recovery. We know that people get better. There's no question about it. Does everybody get better the same speed, the same way? No. But that's true with high blood pressure and diabetes and cancer and other maladies. So people get better. But we had people call legislators and email and share if they're concerned. So we have other things that have the same theme, which is caring, compassion, making sure there's access to treatment, that there's quality treatment, and having people contact legislators is a really big way to make change. Having people go in a church or again at a mental health center, if you work in a mental health center, which I've worked in a few, you see people that aren't doing so well. The people that are doing well, you don't see them as much. You may see them once in 90 days just to touch base and make sure everything is going okay. So you see more of the crisis and the acute challenges. It's really good to have somebody go in there, or when we do the law enforcement training, somebody to go in and say, I was psychotic, I was outside screaming, I had hallucinations, I got arrested, but look at me now, and I've got a job and a family and a car and a house. So, I cut out all the talk in between of the work that it took to get better. But people get better and they can go out and share their story. So, with law enforcement, that's another way. Also, becoming a certified peer support specialist is a big one. And I'm on different task forces and things, some at the national level, where I get to promote peer support and more peers being hired, more peers being in the workplace. And some people may not be familiar with peer support, but what it means is if you're in a psychiatric hospital, you may encounter somebody that they're not a therapist, but they can listen and share their story and help just have that human contact. And we need a lot of them. So that's another way. It's a 40-hour training, and then you have to have volunteer experience in Tennessee, and then you can be a certified peer support specialist. And we need them. And we need to pay them more, by the way, also.
That might be a little off track, but I could not agree more. Thank you, Peggy, for the question. And I do want to add just one quick thing. One of the best ways to tell your story is to tell your story. So often we look for these, and by we, I mean like the global we. I remember when I wanted to be a speaker originally, I was like, okay, well, how can I be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Like that was the first thing that just kept running through my mind. How can I give the I have a dream speech? And somebody was like, a speech is just you talking in front of like a few people. Maybe you should just like way lower your standards. And that really spoke to me because I was thinking about it way too big and I just wasn't there yet. And if I wouldn't have taken on those smaller things, those one-on-ones, those 10 people at a time, I wouldn't have learned anything, got practice. I wouldn't have met just lots and lots of people along the way who helped elevate me and got me in front of more people. I still haven't delivered a speech as famous as I Have a Dream, and that's incredibly unlikely. But I do think we watch all these movies and read all these stories and hear all this stuff, and we think that the only way that we can do anything is at this highest elite level. And I think that does us a real disservice because I got to tell you, some of the most pivotal moments in my life haven't happened in any way that's ever going to be made into a movie. It's when I bumped into somebody in the hall and they took the time to talk to me one-on-one. And you can tell your story in those places, and you never know who's going to be listening. And it's just so incredible. So I completely agree. Get involved with NAMI Tennessee. Do all the big things. Take it as far as you can go. Don't miss out on the opportunity to tell your story to that one person who may need it.
Well, Gabe, there's always younger people coming after us. So I think of you as a young guy. But there's a younger generation than you that is all over TikTok and Reels, and I'm not sure even all the different things. I'm blanking on another one, not Twitter, but there's various channels where people are using their own voice for whatever topic. I mean, it might be I'm going out looking at mushrooms, but I've seen quite a few lately on ADHD, and there's all kind of people sharing their stories uh, from different social media related to their journey, and it's out there. There's an audience for it, or we wouldn't see it. That people express now. Are you going to be the influencer and make a lot of money doing that? It's like how many kids got a guitar when they were 12 and how many of them became, in Led Zeppelin or in the Rolling Stones? Very few. How many people were out on the football field and end up as a quarterback in the NFL? But it doesn't mean that nobody hears your voice. People can relate, they hear stories. So I think that now with social media and it's easier to create things. How many people below 40, let's say, use Canva? And Gabe, I don't remember if you're below 40 or not, but do you use
I'm
Canva?
not even close to 40. I'm closer to 50 than 40.
Okay, well, there's another generation after you, post high school, 20s, 30s. But what about Canva? Are you using Canva?
We use Canva because it's easy. Photoshop is hard.
So it gives we have tools even before Chat GPT. We have tools now that can allow us to create and share thoughts, knowledge. Do you remember when we did the Student Mental Health Film Festival?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, so those were student films that they made all kind of content, and we shared that. Back when we were on quarantine, we wanted to give information to help people not be by themselves, and there was all kinds of ways to express through music, through poetry, through writing. There's many ways. So I think just go for it, whatever's comfortable for you.
I love that. I love that. Just do it. That should be a slogan. Like some big company should have a slogan called "Just Do It." I think it would be really inspiring.
No, that's too trite. Just
You don't think it's good? Okay, we won't use that
But let me
slogan.
tell
It
you
would
why.
never
Like
work
if I'm
anyway.
depressed, I don't want to get out of bed. Then just get up. But when we say go for it, we're encouraging people. You can have a goal. you can make a plan and drum up some energy, hopefully. Go for it. Take a chance. Why not?
I
I
love
never
that.
liked just do it. It's like just saying no. I didn't think that's what we needed.
You think we needed the more nuance? Nuance doesn't do well. It's got to be like we in America we don't like nuance. That's too much in the middle. We like two sides.
Well,
You know,
let me bring this back to,
black or white. That's what we like. We don't like nuance. Is not a good thing.
well, that's not a good thing. There's everything's not black and white.
We
But
need
what about
nuance.
recovery, Gabe? Because when we talk about looking back, the biggest change in my career, not just 10 years, but from the beginning, is instead of telling people take your meds and stay out of the hospital, we talk about recovery.
Yes.
So, do you think recovery happens just by luck or because a professional prescribed you something, or you maybe talking to therapy? Even that's not passive. You have to participate in therapy, but working toward recovery, I think that's the biggest change I've seen. That's important. It's a worthy goal, but you don't. I think just wishing to recover probably is, not as active as won't work as well as having a plan and working your plan.
I think the fastest way to recovery is, of course, participation. And that doesn't mean that you will go faster than other people. Nothing is fair in the world. As I always use the example of the hardest worker doesn't make the most money. It would be nice if that were the case, but there's plenty of people who work much harder than me who make less money. That's just the way the economy is set up, and there's plenty of people who inherited hundreds of millions of dollars and therefore don't work at all and have significantly more money than all of us combined. I think in some ways recovery is like that as well. And we need to have a nuanced understanding of that, because when people don't reach recovery, we have this tendency to say, well, you just need to work harder. Well, they might be working at their maximum. There might be other pieces that we need. And if we can just dismiss them as, oh, work harder, then we're not really looking at each individual as an individual. That said, participating in your own recovery is still the fastest route because it's empowering. You're taking control, you're learning skills, you're figuring things out, you're getting to the right places. But of course, there could be barriers to getting to those places. It's incredibly complicated. But to your point, Jeff, and what I like is it's now recovery based. It used to be don't do this. Now it's achieve this. It used to be you've made all these mistakes. Now it's you can overcome them and get to here. It's really focused on the end, the goal. Whereas it used to be very much focused on the quagmire, the beginning, the illness. And I think that is I have not been around the mental health field as long as you, but I've seen that in the 10, 15 years, 20 years since, well, the 20 years since I've been diagnosed and the 10 years since I've been a mental health advocate. Jeff, I want to throw a question back to you because I'm going to call out your age. You started as a professional in the mental health world. You've worked at lots of places over the years, but you started in the 1980s. In 1980, I was 4. But you were working, had a career, a family, kids. You've been working in mental health since the 80s. What's the difference between when you started in the 80s and now that we're in the 2020s?
Well, the recovery focus is the biggest one for sure. Uh, the insurance world's changed a lot. Back when I was in Ohio, insurance basically did not cover outpatient psychotherapy. There used to be like it was $550 therapy benefit, which went further then than it does now, but it was like 10 sessions. And that was it. And your therapy benefit was gone. So we began fighting about parity way back. I was involved with that in the 80s about parity. The other big change is who's doing the therapy. So psychiatrists did the meds and psychologists did the therapy. And then we had social workers doing therapy, but they were working for the psychiatrist or they worked in a hospital. Today, most of the psychotherapy being done is by master's level counselors, social workers. There's various degrees, marriage and family therapists. Uh, So that's changed. Therapy has become much more widely available and recognized as important and valuable. So that's one part. Uh, the other part with insurance is uh, you may get access to things, and then we have to figure out what about the people without insurance.
Right.
So Medicaid expansion's been a newer thing that's opened up a lot. Uh, we've had mental health centers, but uh, I don't know how much that's changed. They're always trying to do as much as they can with limited resources. But I think the recognition, again, therapies for everybody, that's been a big change. Uh, there's a part that I don't think has changed much, and it's pretty disturbing to me. It causes me a lot of not good feeling about what I experienced with NAMI. And that is there's so many family members that don't know how to help their children or don't feel they can help their children, adult children, that their child's suffering and they're suffering. And it's difficult because my experience tells me that just to put somebody in the hospital for their entire life also had its problems. So we made this big word deinstitutionalization, and we said we want to treat people in the community, but we never fulfilled the promise with enough funding to really do it the way it should be done. We've made improvements in Tennessee, but I'm talking more nationally now. It's really every state that there's parents that it's not necessarily parents, children, spouses, uh, adult children with uh, you name it. There's people concerned about others, and they're not sure. Like, well, here's the biggest part of it. Like, my loved one can't live with me anymore, but they need some supervision. If they're totally on their own, they're getting into crisis. We don't want them just in jail. We don't want them free to just, you know, starve. Uh, People get exploited sometimes when they're in, challenging environments. So
Yeah.
I think we got some issues here still that are really hard to fix. So more more residential kind of things, like I brought up supportive housing in the beginning. I guess that's really it. But how do you balance that with freedom and allowing people to make choices, to be an adult, to live their life, and balance all that? We're babies with this. I think we got a long way to go.
A long way to go. No, Jeff, we're nearing the end of our time, but I want to make sure that and you have plenty of time. You're the executive director. Take all the time that you want. But I think the last question that we want to ask and that we all want to know, where's NAMI Tennessee heading? And don't say it's heading in the direction of getting a new executive director. We all know that. But where do you think NAMI Tennessee is heading? What does the next 10 years look like? And I know this is your expert opinion. It's a guess. You can't see into the future, but I'm curious your thoughts about the next 10 years.
Well, 10 years is a long way to look forward. Uh, I hope in 10 years some of the things that will happen are more in our society. I think Medicaid expansion is so important that we have health care for everybody, and the care you get should not depend on your income. And I hope we get there in 10 years. I hope we get more serious again with supportive housing. I don't know, because we're competing with, I don't want to pay taxes. We have to take care of the environment. We have to have good schools and good education. There's so many things that are important. Uh, I have no idea where the social media and artificial intelligence and all these things will go. And we didn't talk about that yet for the past 10 years, but the impact of the internet is profound, uh, because there are people that are uncomfortable around other people, but they can interact online. And so it reduces isolation, but then what's the loss when it's not person to person social interaction? So when I add all this up together, I think that the pace of change will go faster, and the need to help the most vulnerable will not go away. And we need more for families where uh, it's not just mental illness, it can be other special needs things where over a lifetime their society needs to help, and how we help the most vulnerable, is the measure of great society.
I could not agree with that more. There's so much to do, and the nice part about an organization like NAMI is it continues, right? It just moves forward. Long after I retire and you retire and we move on, NAMI continues to do great things, and I think that that's an important message to remember. But Jeff, what's next for you? What is
Well,
Jeff going to do now that NAMI's gone?
Well, I'm going to go back to the
You're
NAMI.
gone from NAMI. NAMI's not.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the NAMI because I went more to the big picture.
You want
I think
more?
that,
All right.
well, NAMI's got a good board, NAMI Tennessee, and there's new people within the organization. We've added staff for marketing and fundraising and youth and young adult, and we have expanded with our affiliates and trying to build that up. So I think that will continue to grow, and we don't know what the new major trends will be, but there will be some. So I think NAMI is well positioned now through the collaborative relationships that NAMI has with all the other organizations that care about mental health. And so we're at the table, and it's the people, the individual people, that get us at the table. Not when you look at the size of the staff compared to the mental health centers or the this or the that, but when you add the volunteers, we're quite a few. So I see good things ahead for NAMI in Tennessee and nationally. It's my privilege to be on the national board, and I like where we're going to continue to build the alliance and invest, attract investment, to innovate. So I see all that. For me personally, I don't say the word retire because I just would like to try a few other things, not full time. Try a few other things, that what other people have told me. And I'll just give this advice: if you plan to retire, it's a major transition. Think about it a little bit before you do it. And I've got a brother in your town, Gabe, of Columbus, and he'll be working, and then not working. And I would like to do more part-time things and more time with grandchildren, those kind of things. It's been really good to have an opportunity as executive director, and I've been executive director 3 different places, so it's not just NAMI. So we have the privilege to lead for a time, and we hope we leave it better than when we found it. And uh, I hope that I'll find some other new things that just are different.
Well, Jeff, no matter what, we wish you the best success in all the world. I think Donald Lee Smith said it best. Thank you for your service, Jeff, and congrats on your leadership. And he also appreciates your friendship. Now, did you pay him to write that, or?
Don's a mensch. We'll put it that way. You might need. There's a button.
That's the first time that has ever happened on this show, that a camera fell off a monitor. Jeff, it's a sign. It's a sign that you can't retire.
There you go. There was a button up there. It said translate. I thought you might want to try and translate mensch.
You broke the computer. Jeff, do you have any final thoughts before we head off out into this?
Thank you, Gabe, and thank you anybody that pays attention to these broadcasts, and NAMI is here for you. Join us on May 20th for NAMI Walks Tennessee in East, Middle, and West Tennessee. So try and be there.
That's awesome. And of course, you can learn more about that at namitn.org, or if you have any questions, info@namitn.org. But everything that you want is in that email list or on the website, which again is at namitn.org. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we will see you next time on NAMI Tennessee at Home Live.